Welcome back to my channel, everyone. This is Jennifer Jean, the Psychic Scene with Jennifer Jean, and we have a very special guest today. She happens to be my sister, but she is also a she's also a very well-known businesswoman in Wichita, Kansas. She's an entrepreneur, and she is the head mistress of the finishing school for modern women. Please welcome my sister, Jill Miller.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, Jennifer.
So anyway, what I want to know, first of all, is maybe your background and what got you to where you are now. What was your journey on this path?
So I started working in a salon for all of the 80s when I was in my 20s. So all my 20s, I worked at this really crazy, very creative, very avant-garde salon. People would come in and see how we did our hair and how we dressed, and they'd turn around and walk out because they were afraid we'd make them look crazy too. So that was such a really great experience because it allowed me to just take the ball and run with it. So while I was the manager of the salon, the owner was kind of an absentee owner, so I got to do a lot of things that I wanted to create. So I wanted to do email newsletters, so I started doing those. I wanted to do, it wasn't email newsletters, it was a mailed newsletter. I wanted to send out newsletters. We wanted to do fashion shows, all those kinds of things. She just let me take and run with it. And so it really taught me a lot, and it really helped me be very much more of an entrepreneurial mindset from doing that. So I left that job and went back to school full-time to finish my degree. While I worked in the salon, I went part-time to school and worked on my degree. So I quit that job to go back to school full-time. And when I finished school, I thought, well, what am I going to do now? And what I decided to do was business consulting. A lot of what I did with the salons was to work with them on business. I felt like if I could help them be more successful with their businesses, I would be more successful with my own business. So I was doing consulting with them already. And so I just called up some of my salons and said, this is what I'm doing now. And they said, yay, when can we start working together? And so I started doing more and more consulting. 24 years later, that is how I've been making my living for all those years, is doing business consulting. So my specialty is creative businesses and women-owned businesses. And I help businesses open, but I also help businesses grow. And I have worked with lots of businesses in Wichita, but I've worked with businesses all over the world. I've had clients in Dubai. I've had many clients in Brooklyn and in New York and all over the place. So what I love about doing business today is that we're not really tied to one geographic location. It's made it a lot more fun.
Yeah.
So I did
more and more so in the future.
Oh, absolutely. This has changed a lot of things. It's changed how I'm doing my business now too. So I did that for many years. And in 2015, I needed to reinvent myself. And so I decided to start the finishing school for modern women. I noticed when I was consulting that a lot of the problems we all have is getting in our own way. And so I wanted to help women to really own their power and understand that they can achieve anything they want to do, and have been doing all kinds of classes and all kinds of different things to help women really understand what they need to do professionally, personally, spiritually, intellectually, all those things to just live a better life. So it's been a lot of fun. It will be 5 years in September that I've been doing this. And then, so I'm never bored. I have a lot of things going on.
Yeah. I think we both have that ability to never be bored. We always have something in the fire going on.
Only boring people are bored.
So, yeah. So we're going to talk about how you feel that your business is spiritually based. But before we do that, I'd like to ask you, how did you awaken your own power, and what brought you closer to your spirit? What was there any one event, or was it a combination of events?
So my big spiritual awakening came when I worked for the Aveda Corporation for 8 years. After I worked for the salon for 10 years, I worked for Aveda for 8 years, and I sold Aveda products to salons. I absolutely loved it. It was a lot of fun. But what I loved the most was Aveda was such an incredible company to work for. And I worked for a distributor for Aveda called Progressive Beauty Enterprises. And what I loved the most about that job was all the training they did with us and all the work, spiritual work they did with us as well. They brought in shamans to speak with us. They brought in intuitive healers to work with us. They brought in all kinds of people to come and work with us. They brought in a specialist in neuro-linguistic programming training. So all the things that I got from Aveda really woke me up a lot. And it really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And the really interesting thing to me was when I got that job, I had to drive to Minneapolis and be there for a month doing training. And that's a long time to be gone from home. And when I got to Aveda, when I walked into the Aveda Academy the first day, I felt like I had already met all the people there, like I'd already known them forever. And I knew I was exactly the place I needed to be. And it just blossomed even more from there. So I'd say that I really owe that to Aveda. And it's part of what's helped me want to go on and teach people those kinds of things with the finishing school, because not very many companies do that kind of training with their staff. And so we've got to find ways to give that to ourselves. And so that's kind of what I've created with the finishing school.
That's awesome. I love everything you're doing.
Thanks.
So, do you think that you're intuitive? I mean, we'll talk about that. I mean, because I know I've been doing this for a long time, but it seems like your gifts have always been there, but it seems like they're even stronger than they were before.
I didn't really used to think about being intuitive before. I kind of know things. I look at intuition in a lot of different ways. I think part of intuition too is that we learn things from all over the place, from all kinds of different places. And we take all that information and synthesize it into what works for us. And I think that is a kind of intuition too, to be able to synthesize all that information, to put it together. We don't know where our ideas came from or where, we first read about something in particular, but we know that our tuition all brings it in together. I've always been good at that. I've also always been able to intuit things like, as long as I've been doing consulting for 24 years, I know when my clients are going to call and cancel their appointments with me or reschedule their appointments with me. I just know. I can feel them thinking about it. It's the weirdest thing. But that was one of the first ways that I noticed, is I started to be able to predict behavior more. And I would think, oh, they're going to act this way. And then they did. And so I started thinking about more and more about that. But when I really came in touch with my intuition is when I figured out that how empathic I am. I had never even heard that term before. I didn't know anything about it. And I did a finishing school class. It was a special event called Grief Debrief. There was a woman in Wichita who committed suicide, and there were a lot of people that she was friends with that I was really worried that it would become a trend, that people would start committing suicide more. So I wanted to get everybody together and talk about grief and talk about how we're moving past it and how do you know when you need help and things like that. I had 3 therapists come in and do the class with me, and it was really fantastic. It was really what we needed at that moment. Well, one of the women in class started talking about how empathic she was and how much that affected how she felt about the whole situation. And I was like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? And she said, being able to feel the feelings of other people. I was like, oh my gosh, I do that too. And that's when I figured out how much. That's how I figured out how empathic I am. And now that I know that, it's really helped me a lot. It also hurts too. Like times like right now when there's a lot of stress and tension and sorrow and anger and all that in the world, that's not always the greatest thing to feel. And I do have a co-teacher
Right.
for a class. We call it, I can't remember if it was Empowering Empaths or Empath Empowerment. I think it's Empath Empowerment is what we do, because I had a lady who called me and said we were stepping on her copyright and we couldn't use that name anymore. So I can't remember which one it is now. But anyway, we talk about, in that class, we talk about how to protect yourself, how to shield yourself from all the negative emotions that are going on, and how to use your abilities, your gift as an empath to make your life better. So it's been really interesting. And then you and I started doing the class Everyday Intuition together. And I really started studying my intuition more and thinking about it more, and actually studying intuition more and studying psychic abilities more. And so a lot of that I owe to you.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's been a journey for me too, and I'll probably talk about myself in future videos, but I'm really interested in how you feel that you run a spiritually based business. So as a business person, how does one do that? I mean, you need to make a profit, obviously. Oh, yeah. How do you keep it real, but how do you also keep it spiritual?
Well, I have always thought, and I live my life by this idea, and I teach everybody in my finishing school, all my students at WSU. I believe that every day in business is an ethical dilemma. Almost every day you're going to come across, you're going to have to make a decision, and you're going to have to make a decision that's going to impact people. And so you really have to think about, before I make any business decisions, I think I have to weigh out what's going to happen. Who is this going to impact? And then I make a decision based on what I can live with, how I can live, with myself moving forward. And so when I think of things that way, then I am looking at making the most ethical decision that I possibly can. And to me, that's part of my spirituality, is holding my ethics to the point that I'm the weirdest business consultant, because I'm more of a people before profit kind of business consultant. And so, to a lot of business consultants, that's really weird. But I think that part of our responsibility as business owners is to be part of the community and to provide, to make our world a better place. And so that's part of, I think, how we do that, is how we treat people. Also, for me, I just love people. I always have. I just love people. I love meeting new people. I love the people I meet. Even if we don't agree on everything, I'm still loving them. But I think that is a lot of what guides me too in my business practice, is my love for people, and that makes me put people first. But I also think that Aveda taught me a lot. And one of the things that Aveda taught me is, when you are doing business for the greater good, that business will come to you. The universe will provide for you. And I truly, truly believe that the universe is abundant. And anytime I start getting worried and I think that, my business isn't bringing in enough money, or I want new clients or things like that, and the more worried I get, the worse my business gets. And when I just can surrender that and let it go and trust the universe, then it's just amazing, all the things that have come to me. Through this COVID situation, I was really worried about how it would work out, and I decided this is going to be a day-by-day situation. I'm not going to be able to try to force things to be the way I want them to be. I'm going to just have to let the sage, the spirit, guide me. And so that's part of how I think my business is also spiritually based, is that I trust in the universe. And I have just found every time I do that it works. And I started doing that. A friend of mine talked to me, and I was worried about things. And she said, you're going to have a lot more success in life if you go through life like this with your open palms, then you are clutching at what you can't have. And so when I turn that around from this to this, it impacted my business and my life in profound ways. I also believe that if you are not running a spiritually based business, if you are not putting the universe ahead of your own personal needs, that it doesn't work to try to manifest things. I think manifesting things has to be for more altruistic reasons than just, I want to be rich. Hey, universe, make me rich. Although that's something to ask for too. But at the same time, I think that when you are living by the tenets of how things work, that you are more rewarded.
I love that. So tell me about how the people that you work with, tell me how you support the arts and also how you support women in business, because that's a big part of what you do.
Yeah. A lot of how I support women in business, well, my consulting clients, I have all kinds of consulting clients. I've had very unenlightened men. I've had very enlightened men. I've had like every kind of customer you can imagine.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's okay. I love people, so I just want to help them, and I love business, and I want to help them with that. So a lot of how I help women has been through the Finishing School for Modern Women, because it took me a couple years to figure out that I needed to have classes on entrepreneurship for women. I've only been doing this for 20-something years, and I was like, oh, wow, yeah, maybe I should have a class about that. So I have several classes about entrepreneurship. It's about, do you really want to be an entrepreneur? Are you sure? And I try to talk people out of it.
Yeah.
Like, are you sure you want to have your own business? Are you really, really sure? Because this sucks, and it's hard. And so I try to talk people out of it. And then I have another one called Boss Lady. And that's all about how to use financial tools to help you with your business. So it's all about profit and loss statements, and also your like, what do you bring to the market and things like that. And then I have some marketing classes too that are really good for helping women. I decided with the Finishing School for Modern Women, instead of just having a school for all kinds of business for whoever wants to come, I decided to base my business on training for women. And I did that because I see that as women, we are still so subjugated every day, that if we're not completely standing up for our rights all the time, that they're taken away from us. And so I think as women are more than 50% of the population, we're the majority, yet we still let ourselves be subjugated. And so what I think is that we need to teach women how to own their power, how to have the confidence they need to step forward in their lives. And so I almost am deprogramming women in this class. I have a class on negotiating techniques, which I do differently than other negotiating. Women don't like to negotiate the same ways that men do. So I teach them a different way to do it. And it works for men too. It works better for women because of how we are socialized to behave. But the biggest thing I find in that class is many women don't even know what they want, because we've been socialized not to believe we have that option. Yeah. And so I'm doing a lot of reprogramming, like, okay, you deserve to have everything you want in your life. This is how we're going to do it. That kind of thing.
A lot of people in their business, I'm sure. So what about the arts? You also teach at Wichita State.
So I believe that everybody deserves to make a living doing what they love. And whether that's being a visual artist, whether it's being on the stage, whether it's being a musician, whatever it is that you love to do, you deserve to make a living doing that. And so I just believe we just need to be strategic about it. So in the entrepreneurship and the arts class, I do a lot of it's a lot of basic business stuff, like what are the different formats of business that you can have. I have a whole financial literacy section in the class too, because the biggest thing that creatives don't like to do is the accounting part and the numbers part of things. Yeah. But it's super easy, and it's really can be kind of creative and fun if you let it be that way. And so I try to teach them. I try to teach them about the financial things that they're going to need to have their business. And I think, we don't accept literature like literacy. We want people to be able to read and write, but we don't necessarily care if people can take care of finances. So I think it's really important, if we're looking at literacy, to look at financial literacy as well.
Yeah,
and that's what I,
because I know people, right, creatives and intuitive, the other people I know who are creative and intuitive really have a hard time with that. So that's a great skill to have. Yeah.
Well, it's really one of my superpowers, is being able to take really complicated stuff that scares people and break it down in a way that I can explain it so it's not so scary after all. Because really it's just addition and subtraction and ratios and a little bit of multiplication and division. It's really nothing hard to do, but people are afraid of it, and so they make it harder. And so I got to break it down and make it more fun.
That's good. That's a good way to look at it, because I know I get a little befuddled on that kind of information. I probably should take that class at some point.
You should.
So I guess I should. So we talked a little bit about, how can one have a spiritually based business, but is there any takeaway, or how do you recommend people to get started to think that way? And are there any like roadblocks, or, overcoming biases or roadblocks? How can you make your business more spiritual?
Well, I think
still make a profit.
Yeah, I think part of it is fear. I think that people are really afraid, if they're not, constantly trying to hustle to make that dollar, that they're going to get themselves into trouble. I've had students in entrepreneurship in the arts class say, I thought business, how you got ahead in business, was to step all over the people beneath you. He said, from your class, I know that is not the case now, because in that class, I talk a lot about community and about how, about how we come together as a community, and especially in the arts business, being part of the community is really important. And that, and I have 8 to 10 guest speakers that are making their livings in the arts in some way or another, come be a guest speaker in the class. And now that we can do all this virtual stuff, then I will have you come this next semester and talk about making a living in music. So I know. So
hopefully.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is we've got to get past our fear that if we aren't stepping on the people underneath us, that we can't make our best living. And then I read a lot, and that's really helped me. One of the books that really helped me the most, and I couldn't find it as I was looking for it today before our call, but it's called Sacred Commerce. And it's by the same people that did the Cafe Gratitude. If you've heard of Cafe Gratitude, they started in San Francisco, and they even have them in Kansas City now. But it's all raw food, and it's all based on gratitude. So when you come in, you have to tell your server one thing you're grateful for today, or whatever the question of the day is. It's just a whole experience about being grateful. And so this book, Sacred Commerce, its subtitle is Business as a Path of Awakening, and it's by Matthew Engelhart. And I highly recommend it. They look at this as a manual for building spiritual community in the workplace. And so that's a really, really good one. Really good one. And then there's some others that I really like too, that are just really kind of standard things, like Principle-Centered Leadership by Stephen Covey.
Okay.
So that just talks about leading from your heart, leading from your principles, knowing what your principles are, and then helping people see that. And that, I think, is a big part of it. The Art of Happiness at Work by the Dalai Lama is a really good one, too.
Very good.
And that's good for people who are working, not just bosses. But we spend so much time at work, we should be happy, and it just uses Buddhist principles for that. Also like the book Tribes by Seth Godin. This just talks about how we need to bring people together. and how we're going to lead, how we lead groups of people. So we come up with what leads them, and then we tell them how we want them to go. And I think that's a big part of it. This is more of a marketing book, but the Passion Conversation is all about how to market yourself with the passion to do more in your community and more in the world. So this advertising agency only takes on businesses that are doing good works, and they spread the word. They spread the business through word of mouth, which is a really amazing thing. And then I just love Orbiting the Giant Hairball, which is just a really great book about business culture. And it was written by Godin, MacKenzie, and he's passed away now. He lived in Lawrence. He worked for the Hallmark company for a long time. And this is just such a great book about, life and what's important in business and what's important in the world, and like putting those kinds of things first before making a profit. So anyway, those are some of my favorite business books.
Yeah, those are great resources. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
So the only other thing I have to ask is, what's next for Jill Miller? What are you got in the pipeline, and what's going on?
Well, I have been doing the finishing school classes live in Wichita, Kansas for the past 5 years. And a couple of years ago, I decided I wanted to try to do some online learning. And so I went through the very laborious process of setting up this big old website and recording my classes, and then doing quizzes in between and putting together all of this distance learning information. But what I found is that people really want to be more part of the community. And that's what I loved about the live classes at the finishing school, is when we come together, we are so smart. I don't have all the answers. Together, we have all the answers. And so every class has so much value because it's different every time. And so it's the coming together and the meeting of the minds, I think, that makes the finishing school classes so cool. So doing them on video, it just didn't fit that special spark that we have when we're live. And so thank you to this pandemic health crisis, I've had to adapt. And through that, I've learned that by doing the classes live through Zoom, I can have people from all over the United States come, and all over the world, really, and come to the classes and to participate in our community, and to make all the connections that create all the sparks that are exactly where we need to be, coming together as a community, especially coming together as a community of people who are like-minded, who want to make the world a better place. We really need to find more and more ways to come together. And so I am really excited that this has worked out the way it has, because I started doing my classes online, and I found that this really is my path to international superstardom, not recordings of me.
So tell everyone about the class that you and I teach together. We've taught it how many times now? 3 or 4?
I think this will be our 4th or 5th time.
Maybe so, yeah. So
yeah, I think it's our 4th.
Yeah, maybe 4th. So tell us about that class and what you love about teaching with me.
Well, I'll start with that. So I have lots of co-teachers that I work with on classes because I don't know everything. And so I find people who specialize in certain things, or people will come to me and ask if we can do classes together. And working with co-teachers is so interesting because not everybody is good at collaborating. Some people are better at it than others, and so some people are very difficult to co-teach with. You never know, if it's your sister, exactly how it's going to work out or how well you're going to feed off of each other and work off each other. And I was blown away by even the first 5 minutes that we were teaching together. It felt like we'd been doing it together our whole lives. It was just scary.
We would think the same thoughts. Like I could look at you and I knew what you were thinking, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
So the way we play off each other and the way we teach together just works so well that was one of the things I love the most about working with you, is just how effortless it is. And that's huge. There are some teachers I've done.
Yeah.
Well, true, but that doesn't always mean anything. Just because we've been raised together or because we're sisters doesn't mean we're going to be able to do it very well. But I love that. I just love how effortless it is, and just, yeah, everything just was so easy and fun. And that's something I like working with you about too, is we both like fun in the same kind of ways. And so I think that helped. In the everyday intuition class, my goal with this class was to help everybody realize that they have intuition and that they just have to recognize it and trust that intuition. And so those are some of the big things that we did in the class. So we talk about what intuition is, and we have people take a little quiz to find out what kind of how their intuition manifests itself. And that could be more than one thing. And then we give tips on how to be more intuitive, how to be more in touch with your intuition, how to find it, and then how to use it in your everyday life. And at the end, we do a little billet reading where we have people write down a question, and we fold up the pieces of paper, and then we let people draw out the pieces of paper with the questions on it. And then they have to hold it in their hands and not look at the answer, and they have to try to answer it first, and then they open it up and look at it and answer it. And it's been so much fun. And I think through Zoom, through the private chat, we'll be able to do that same thing when we do the class live on the 30th of May.
We would do, but it'll work. We'll make it work. So. Well, that is so much fun. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be different teaching virtually, but I think it'll be just as effective. I think we're going to have a lot more people. I know some of my students and mentors are interested in taking the class. So I hope we have a really good show. So the last question is, how can we contact you?
You can contact me through my website, which is finishingschoolformodernwomen.com. I have another website for my consulting business, and that's JillDMiller.com. And you can find me on Facebook too, or on Instagram, or on Twitter, or on LinkedIn. I'm Jill D. Miller on all of those platforms. So that's a good way to find me. And my email is easy. It's jill@JillDMiller.com. And and of course, if they contact you, you'll know how to put them in touch with me too.
Exactly. So we'll make sure that happens. Well, anyway, Jill, thank you so much for being here today. I had a great time interviewing you. I've never interviewed my sister before, so it was a lot of fun, and you have so many great ideas. So we hope to see you all at the class May 30th. I think it's from 1 to 2:30?
1 to 3:30 Central Time.
Oh, sorry, 1 to 3:30. Okay. All right. I will correct that. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
You
Namaste.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.